to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for health, happiness, and purpose. I'm Nancy, your host, and my amazing friends Gabby and Elise. We're going to chat all about having your voice heard. So, why is it important to feel heard? Well, as humans, we're wired for connection. It's a basic human need to feel heard, valued, and connected to others. I've known many women, myself included, who didn't feel, for lack of a better word, worthy of being heard. And I know that sounds funny, odd, yet I completely understand. Growing up, I had a very dominating yet amazing father, and I think he really valued children being seen and not heard. And so when you're raised in a home where your role models are one dominant and one very passive, it's easy to feel like your voice or what you have to say is not important. And for me, this eventually led to deep bitterness, resentment, and a ton of confusion. I was so dedicated to others, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted for myself. So for me, I really think and feel this life lesson for me is about finding my voice and expressing what is important to me. So let me check in with you, ladies. Where in your life have you not feel heard, and what have been the consequences?
Similar to what you mentioned right now, as far as growing up and feeling like children were meant to be seen and not heard. I think I grew up just like that. We weren't allowed to have an opinion. We weren't really allowed to question anything, really weren't allowed to kind of, be involved in adult conversation. It was seemed almost as disrespectful or, getting involved in something that wasn't our business. And most of the time it was being shut down, being told that, this isn't any of your concern right now. And it's crazy how that kind of carries into adulthood, or as an adult, how it's kind of automatic to shut yourself down or not question authority, or not be curious about a situation because of the way you were brought up. So I definitely resonated with that when you just mentioned how, you're meant to be seen and not heard. And sometimes even as adult, I find myself going to that place where tend to, be very just in my mind and not expressing or sharing. And that is super detrimental to being heard, literally, for sure.
Right. I know for me, it ended up being like, when I had that, it ended up translating into a belief that I wasn't worthy. And so for me, I think I really felt, I know as a young woman, I was more like, I'm fine. I don't care. Whatever you want. I was kind of going along with the crowd. And I think that was really, really detrimental to me growing up. How about
I
you?
agree. And then it brings up even anxiety of like a fear of speaking up. Because, what if what I say is not important? It really isn't worthy of, conversation, or that fear of judgment of, being looked down upon for trying to participate in just expression. And it just gets embedded so deeply into your being sometimes. And when you're not aware of it, it can cause so many problems and relationships, in communicating with at work, in your job. And sometimes we tend to shut ourselves down also when we try to get curious with ourselves or start to explore things with ourselves. It really can, at least I've seen and felt in my own experience, that sometimes it causes me to shut myself down also.
100%. How about you, Elise?
So my upbringing was very different. I was brought up with parents who valued what we had to say and included us in conversations. And, my father was a sociology professor, so we were almost mandated to have opinions and share our opinions and dialogue. And the dinner, we ate dinner as a family every night, and we were expected no TVs on and had to have those conversations. And so I think that raised me to know that my voice matters, and to know that to be less afraid of sharing my voice and sharing my values and being heard. For me, where I hit roadblocks was at work. I would have leaders along the way. I mean, I was blessed to have amazing leaders. But not every leader can be amazing. And I can think of one that did not want my voice heard and did not want me to be my authentic self and to bring my ideals and ideas and perspectives. And I just remember how very hard it was for me to try and grapple with why. Why are you not listening to my voice? Why don't you want my voice? Why aren't you asking me? Where's the leadership autonomy? Why are you keeping me down? Right. And I left that position and I started a whole new career, because I wasn't valued and I wasn't heard. And it took me many years after that to reconcile with, a very wise HR colleague of mine said to me, you can't give what you ain't got.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. You can't give what you don't have in you. And that's really what it was for that boss with me. It had nothing to do with me. It was really about them. But that's where it showed up for me.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, when people don't feel heard, it can lead to a lot of health consequences. For sure, mental health, it impacts stress and anxiety when you feel ignored or dismissed. It can increase your stress and anxiety levels. Prolonged feelings of not feeling heard or understood also contributes to hopelessness, isolation, and depression. Not feeling validated or acknowledged can cause a person to question their self-worth. It can also have physical consequences. Chronic stress can compromise your immune system. Emotional distress often leads to insomnia or disrupted sleep patterns. And increased stress levels over time raises blood pressure and contributes to heart disease. Also, people can turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as overeating to fill the void by not feeling emotionally supported. So many things. Emotional stress from feeling unheard can make it harder to focus, reducing productivity and cognitive function. You can ruminate. So it's a consequence that can lead to many, many things. So for me, it's only with a ton of coaching and having close friends that, they really helped me feel what I have to say matters. So how can we overcome it is the question, right? I think building self-confidence is the first step, and it starts with a really simple acknowledgement of all the things you're good at. I mean, creating a folder, like really going deep and really taking some time and what am I really good at? Being really, mindful, believing in yourself. You have to start with a really small list and make every accomplishment, because it builds self-confidence. Even like you tied your shoes, you rode your bike, all the things you've done, it's really good to do that. Make sure you're speaking loudly and clearly. Pay attention to body language. Are you open or closed? Be focused and present and maintain good eye contact. And I would say if you recognize that you're someone who's not felt heard, maybe helping someone else to feel heard is a good first step. So being fully present, it's not about hitting them with a battery or questions and jumping in and finishing their sentences. It's about good eye contact and allowing them to speak when they need to speak. Fully hearing someone without interruption, it allows for a very therapeutic bond to develop. And feeling comfortable with silence and not rushing in to fill the gaps is good. And active listening, when you can sit with a person, reflect back some of the emotion present, it shows that person you're really present with them. And you can practice reflective listening. That's when you listen to someone to repeat back their story using the same but some very different words. And it almost has a magical effect of letting that person look in the mirror and get a fresh perspective of their situation. Provides them with a bit of proof that you've been listening. Holding space for someone is about being present for the person in front of you, not judging them, but allowing them a safe space to feel their emotions. And validating their feelings. creates and strengthens a therapeutic bond. Listening but not fixing can be a challenge, not to run in or fix someone's problem, yet it's important for people to feel their own sense of autonomy. Anything else you think would help?
I think we are much better at, validating others, listening to others, hearing others as women. It's just something that maybe comes a lot easier to us.
Yeah.
And I think it just takes a little bit of insight to acknowledge when we do feel that we are not either being heard or hearing ourselves, to model ourselves after ourselves and practice listening and hearing ourselves similarly to how we would do to someone else that we really, really care about, a close friend, a family member, someone that we really care about. How do we give them the time? How do we acknowledge their voice? How do we, hold that space for them to really allow them to feel heard, and kind of practice some of that on ourselves, and learn how to value ourselves, value not only like our thoughts, the things that we think about ourselves that are positive, and slowly and surely begin to actually believe some of those things. A lot of the times we seek so much external validation. We base our worth on what other people say to us and how they compliment us, and how they reassure us and make us feel good through their words. And we tend to downplay that and kind of shut it down sometimes. Or if someone, let's say someone compliments you, oh, that dress looks great on you. Oh, this whole thing, yeah, it's not a big deal. Downplaying it, kind of like quieting down your own voice. Or, hey, that was a great job on that project that you did. Like, oh, I could have done better. But it was all right. And just making a plan of, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to downplay myself. I'm not going to, make excuses for any of my successes. I'm going to make a point to start acknowledging, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was, I felt good about that. Or, yeah, thanks. I like this outfit too. That's why, I picked it for today. And just practice doing that over and over, even though initially it may not feel natural. It may not, fit perfectly at first, but just practicing over and over, accepting, any positive validation so that you yourself can start to really validate yourself. And then over time, I think that gives us the confidence to be more able to hear ourselves, and then, kind of advocate for our own voice and to be heard out in, other kind of circumstances. Yeah. It takes time to kind of acknowledge that and practice that and really feel good about it.
And I like what you said about just being with yourself. I think in this day and age, with all of our devices and TVs, it's, for a lot of people, it's really difficult to just be with themselves without anything else going on. About being your own best friend and enjoying your own company. For me, that's been huge.
Yeah, I, a lot of times want to fill up the silence or the space with either background. I found myself the other day like having 3 screens on. I had the TV on, I had my phone in front of me, and I had my laptop. Literally, there were like 3 screens, like just occupying time. So I wasn't, doing any thinking whatsoever. It was just kind of like mindlessly doing 3 different things at once. And there wasn't anything intentional about that.
You caught yourself.
Yeah,
I did. I was like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing?
Distraction.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So I want to pick up with the whole concept of the self-confidence and making space for yourself that Nancy, you started, and Gabby, you really kind of glommed onto. And I want to put a little twist on it. So for me, having my voice heard is all about my own courage, my courage to speak up, to be my authentic self, even in spaces where it may be uncomfortable or even scary. And for me, how I do that is really leveraging my core beliefs and my values and how they play into what I want to say in any given group, right? So finding, you have to have that self-confidence, but then you also need to have a little courage on top of it to really say what you want to say in a way that grabs people's attention, right? So you want to be heard. How do you make it so that you will always be heard? And it's the authenticity and the compassion and the conviction of attaching whatever the topic is to your core values and beliefs. And I have found that that helps me, just give me that little boost of courage sometimes. You know, I remember a long time ago, I went to this school meeting. My kids were in elementary school, and the principal had left, and they were doing a search for a new principal. And so I went to this meeting, and everybody around me was attacking the school and the teachers and the processes and the policies and the whole district. And they were teachers in other districts, and there was so much negative, like, vitriol. And I remember saying, okay, but I've had really good experiences, especially with one of my children who had, at that time, serious special needs and serious challenges. And I said, am I going to sit here and just listen to all of this, or am I going to give my point of view? And I really had to go back to my values and my core beliefs. And honestly, I mean, it sounds silly, but it really was one of the scariest conversations that I ever participated in. But I did stand up and give my point of view. And I said, I've heard what everyone else has to say, but I want to share that, you know, we've had a really positive experience, and my child has gotten just the best collaboration, the best creativity, the best dedication to make her the best version of her that she can be. And these teachers and specialists have partnered with us, and it was almost against everything that everybody else had said. And I got some daggers and I got some looks, and it wasn't for sure my most comfortable moment at all. But I look back on that and I'm like, that took courage for me to stand up in that environment and say what I had to say. And it all came back to my beliefs and core values.
That's awesome. Really awesome. Okay, anything else, ladies?
I also, well, I do want to go back to when you were talking about the impacts that not having your voice heard can have on your body and mind. And for me, this is one of the most classic mind-body connections, right? So you're not being heard, your voice is not wanted or accepted or honored. And what that does to your mind, and we talk all the time about how our minds can be assholes. And what that does to our minds, in turn, what it does to our bodies. And, you know, I think we all can think back of a time when something like this turned out to have physical ramifications, right? Or showed up physically.
Right.
I know for me, it did, you know, back when I was really struggling with not being heard or not being valued because I wasn't being heard and my voice wasn't allowed. Really, not only did it have huge mental impacts, but it did have some physical impacts as well. That mind-body connection is so strong and often forgotten about.
I think as a kiddo, for me, the biggest issue that I had was probably not sleeping well. I had, you know, it was so hard to fall asleep because you are just like kind of ruminating and kind of thinking about, you know, all of the things that you are not able to really participate in. And then it gives a sense of loss of control when, or just lack of ability to have any kind of control whatsoever. And when you feel that you have no control, it just gives you so much unnecessary, anxiety. And, for me as a kiddo, that was not being able to sleep. And I probably wet the bed until I was a little too old when I was, younger, which, I'm admitting to it now. But as a family medicine physician, with taking care of so many people, things that manifest for individuals who describe stressors, which in a part you can kind of, extrapolate to in a, powerlessness, not feeling heard in a variety of different circumstances, whether it's, in a relationship at home, where there's a definite power imbalance, or, situations at work where, they feel that they are powerless, not being heard, not being respected in a certain way. Migraine headaches, body aches, acid reflux and stomach upset, not to mention the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, so many physical manifestations of just like a mental unrest of not having some kind of power or control or being heard in a variety of different circumstances. And the amazing thing is that for individuals who seem more resilient, more able to either, express themselves or, be confident in certain situations, even though they may not be perfect or, 100% how they would like, seem to be more at peace in their body as well. And I think there's a lot of studies, I'm not going to quote any or reference any studies right now, but that show that there definitely is that mind-body connection where there's a lot people who are more resilient, more able to, really stick to those core values and persevere despite the stressors, tend to have better health outcomes than people who don't have or have a perception that their voice isn't heard, powerlessness, kind of the victim mentality, tend to have worse health outcomes in the long term.
Wow. Yeah.
That's interesting. I almost wonder if there is interesting thyroid problems. I have this book that I really love called Metaphysical Anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
I just looked up thyroid.
That's a really thick book. Did you read all that? Did you read all that?
Listen to this on thyroid problems. You have a deep fear of not being heard and being misunderstood. So you communicate your opinions with great urgency. You fear you will not have enough time to say what needs to be said. Pretty interesting. I'm just curious about the thyroid now.
Well, inflammation, like if you think about how inflammation happens in our body, right? Inflammation, we think about it as a bad thing, but the purpose for it in the body is to heal something, heal something that's gone haywire.
Right.
But it doesn't feel good. It also does damage when the body is trying to heal something. At the same time, it causes, bad symptoms. It causes pain, causes fatigue, causes, intolerance to other things that you used to be able to tolerate. Stress, triggers inflammation in the body. And there's a lot of things that we don't in the medical community, 100% can attribute to a specific trigger, but definitely stress, whether it's caused by, whatever the circumstance, leads to a lot of inflammation, and some of that can trigger autoimmune processes that can affect our thyroid, that can affect our musculoskeletal system, that can affect our, our bone marrow. It can affect our brain. It can affect so many systems.
Right.
And it can be something challenging to really reconcile.
Right. Huge respect for our bodies. Huge
Right.
respect.
Right.
Okay, ladies, it's been great having this conversation with you. I really look forward to our time together. And to our amazing listeners, if you've gotten some value or insights, please like and share this podcast. Or if you've resonated with this, please reach out to a friend, coach, or therapist and get yourself heard. Until next time, speak up and share your incredible voices.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.